Welcome on in, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. This is episode 68. This is our AFL Trade Week wrap-up episode. It's been a massive week and a bit of AFL football news. Trade Week started pretty slow, but it certainly ramped up towards the end. We had a lot of trades go through on the last day, which was yesterday at time of recording, a couple days ago, by the time this episode goes live. As always, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Whether you're on YouTube or Spotify, all interactions are very helpful, and I appreciate them. 2 episodes go live every week of this podcast. Monday's episode is always focusing on AFLW, or at least at the moment during their season. The second episode goes live on Friday every week, and that is our AFL Men's episode. So we're looking at everything in the off-season at the moment. This week we're looking at AFL Trade Week. So yeah, that's our focus. We're going to go through it all. Don't forget also on the YouTube channel, plenty of other videos, including a full wrap-up of AFL Trade Week. Sort of similar to this podcast episode, but a lot more in detail of the trades as they are. So without any further ado, let's jump into Adelaide Crows and what they have gained and lost during... mainly their position post AFL Trade Week. 3 players coming in: Isaac Cumming, Alex Neil-Bullen, James Peatling, all coming in. Leaving the club is Elliot Himmelberg, and 3 draft picks they have left: pick 4, pick 64, and pick 82. Pick 4 is huge. That should, if they draft well, be very beneficial for them. Pick 4 is huge. Should be able to get a good young player with that. And I mean, it might end up being pick 5 depending on what Brisbane. Whether teams jump on Levi before pick 4, which I would imagine they will. Probably pick 2, that will happen. But yeah, really solid pick position. Really, really good off season so far from them. In all honesty, Isaac Cumming, Alex Neil-Bullen, and James Peatling are all definite players that will play a role for Adelaide this year. I would imagine they will all be playing pretty much every week, and that's a good sign for Adelaide. They've certainly improved, in my opinion. Himmelberg going out, he's not someone that's played a lot of football for Adelaide. He's been there for 4 seasons, I think, roughly. No, more than that. 6 seasons, 7 seasons, somewhere around that. But never played more than 11 games in a season, so he's not someone that's consistently been in the team. Which, it's a loss that he's left, but at the same time, the 3 players that they bought in, I think, are all better. And chuck in the fact that they've got pick 4. If they use that well, this could be a really good off-season for Adelaide. We said it last year that they should have been a team that jumped up the ladder last year, or coming into 2024, and they just kind of let us all down. All the believers of Adelaide Crows let us down a bit, but, that's how it is. At the end of the day, there's not that much difference between them and the teams that finished like 4th, 5th on the ladder. Like, there's a few games, granted, and a little bit of skill, but it's not a huge difference. And so adding these 3 players, I don't think it makes all the difference, but I think it certainly helps them going into season 2025, jumping across to the Brisbane Lions. No players come in through free agency or trades. They just lose Harry Sharp. It's not the biggest loss for them. He's only been at the club for 4 years, played 16 matches. We haven't seen a lot from him at AFL level. Gets an opportunity at a new club going forward. Probably benefits him. I don't think he would have still got much of an opportunity in 2025 at Brisbane. I think he's still a fair way down the usual pecking order. They had a lot of injuries this year and he didn't make his way into the team all that much. So I don't think that's a big loss for them. A lot of draft picks going Brisbane's way. 27, 34, 42, 43, 49, 60 and 66. A fair chunk of them will probably be eaten up in the drafting of Levi Ashcroft, depending on who puts a claim in for him at what pick. But it will be pretty high up that someone goes for him because, arguably the best or very close to the best player in the draft. But luckily for other teams, it is a very stacked draft this year, or at least it looks that way at the moment. So um, adding him in, adding maybe a couple other young players with later picks, it could be. I mean, it's not a bad off season for them. Obviously, Joe Danaher going out is a concern, but at the end of the day, it's manageable. It's not the end of the world for them. They're going to have to find someone that plays that. They're either going to have to change their system a little bit, or they need somebody else that can pinch it in the ruck, because Joe Danaher does a lot of the backup ruck work to allow Oscar McInerney to have a rest and stuff. And then in the grand final, Darcy Fort to have a rest. So they will need to find something for that role, someone for that role, or just change their system completely and go to rucks, which, I mean, it's not the worst idea. Darcy Fort's obviously a very good ruckman, can handle the role, but we'll see how they go with that come next year, I guess. Carlton Blues had an interesting trade week, not draft week. Nick Haynes comes in, good get through free agency from GWS. Out goes Matt Uys and Matthew Kennedy through trades. And draft picks, they got pick 3. They traded out their first round picks that were like about pick 12 or so, and get in pick 3. So I think that's huge for them. Pick 3 in this draft will be long-term beneficial. Pick 38, 63, 68, 69 and 72. Not too much else other than pick 3 for them. But overall, that's what they've betted on. Bet on? Yeah, just bet. That's what they've bet on in this one, is the future of the club. They've gone for pick 3. And, I mean, they haven't lost that much in Uys and Kennedy, and they got Nick Haynes. So, team for next year stays roughly about the same level as it was this year. It'll be interesting to see how they fill the Uys small forward role. They might need somebody to step up into that role. We'll see where that comes from. But pick 3 is huge. If they can get a ready-made player who can have basically most of this season in the senior team, and develop him while also still not dropping out of the top 4 or 5 teams in the competition, that will be huge for Carlton's future and the next 5 or 6 years of their club. On to the next batch of teams, Collingwood Magpies. They are the opposite of Carlton. They've gone all in on this season, no doubt about it. There's a lot of talk about it in AFL media. A lot of people are like, oh, if they don't win a premiership in the next 2 years, they're done. It's a terrible trade period for them. At the end of the day, they won a premiership just last year. Like, it's not the end of the world. They've gone all in on trying to get another one. Good on them. That's what they've gone for. Dan Houston is a massive in, 2-time All-Australian. In my eyes, probably the best player that was in traded clubs this off-season. So I just see that as a massive in for Collingwood. John Noble goes out, Dan Houston goes straight in. Same position, better player. Harry Perryman as a free agent, yeah, they paid a fair bit for him, but at the same time, he could play a lot of roles for Collingwood, and he will be very beneficial, I think, going forward for this club. Out goes, as I said, John Noble and Joe Richards, who is a young player who showed plenty of good signs, but at the end of the day, he kind of was also in a role at Collingwood that is probably one of their deepest positions in small forward role. They've got plenty of small forwards still, even with Joe Richards leaving. So I don't think it's the end of the world for Collingwood there. Draft picks, they don't have much. 52, 55, 58, 88. It's unlikely they will get much, if anything, with those 4 picks. But at the end of the day, speculate, see what you can get, and they're all in on this year and probably the next year after that. So 25, 26. And then, look, things could be really hard for them from that point. Depending what happens over the next couple of years, it might not be. Some of these young players might fully develop. I mean, they're still going to have some gun players in the Dacos brothers. They've got plenty of young players still. So, yeah, they'll have a lot of retirements, but they also probably will have plenty of dollars to spend. Next up, the Bombers. No players in, only Jake Stringer out, which in the end they didn't get much for him, but I think at the end of the day, Essendon kind of wanted him gone from what we see. That's how it appeared to us as a viewing public. It'll be interesting to see how the Bombers fill up his goals for next season. He kicked 41 or something, I think, this year. Played a really good role most of the year. He also pinch hits in the midfield a bit, and actually one of the better centre clearance rate players in the AFL. So it will be a little bit difficult, I think, for the Bombers to replace him. I don't think they have a ready-made player to take that role as maybe the second key forward. He's not really a key forward, but you get what I mean. Like that second target as a forward, obviously, Langford's their number one. Stringer was probably number two this year. So somebody's going to have to step up. They've got players there. Someone's just going to have to really own that role themselves. Draft picks, they've got 28, 31, 40, 46, 53, 54 and 65. So nothing high up in the draft, but they've got plenty of picks, which was done deliberately. They know who they want. They've got the Coco, you know what I mean. I can't even think of the word, but you know, he's going to the club. They didn't want to use up a first round pick. Getting him, this way they can use their points, get rid of some of these draft picks, and they've managed to get themselves an extra first round pick for next year. So I think long term for the Bombers, it's a pretty good off season so far. They just need to make sure that these younger players that they are bringing in, they develop properly and they find a way to take that next step in 2025. Fremantle Dockers, one player in, no players out. I think this is a pretty solid change. Shai Bolton coming in for Freo could be really beneficial for them. Is he their missing piece? I don't know. They should have been certainly finals team this year. They probably could have been a top 4 team. They just fell apart right at the end. Shai Bolton coming in certainly improves their team. They've lost no players, so that's a benefit. And they still have pick 14, 30 and 67. So they still have a pretty solid draft pick in pick 14. Pick 30 is also potentially going to be okay. But Shai Bolton and pick 14 coming into their team. Pick 14 is not necessarily a pick that will be drafting a player ready to go week 1 of the AFL season next year, but it's probably looking at someone that's probably going to play 10 plus games next year or thereabouts. I think Fremantle have to improve based on this. Obviously, they're going to need luck with injuries and whatnot, but they should be a better team 2025 than 2024 based on what they've done so far in the off-season. It all comes down to draft night, though, of course. Next up, we've got Geelong Cats. They bring in Bailey Smith, no players out, so that's a benefit. Obviously, Tom Hawkins has retired. But, I mean, he wasn't huge for them this year anyway. Picks 45, 57, 75. In a way, kind of similar to Collingwood. Not much coming their way draft night, other than speculative picks. Bailey Smith coming in, I mean, he doesn't make her team worse, that's for sure. No players going out. I don't think it makes Geelong much better, if at all really that much better. But it certainly helps their depth. He'll be playing every week, and they'll have an extra good players playing in the VFL. It's beneficial for Geelong in the end, but it's not a massive move. But they were only 2 kicks in the end away from making it to the grand final, so improvement's not really what they need. It's just that bit of luck towards the end of the year. Gold Coast, they were busy, no doubt about it. 3 players come in: Himmelberg, Noble, and their big one, Daniel Rioli, going out Atkins, Lukosius. Picks 39, 41, 51, 61, 70, 76, and 78. All those picks will probably be chewed up by academy players. So they don't care about top high level picks this year because they are going all in on the academy players that they have access to. Good on them. If it works, it will be very huge for them. 3 players coming in: Himmelberg, Noble, and Rioli. Is interesting strategy there. 2 running backmen, Noble and Rioli. Losing Lukosius, obviously not ideal, but at the end of the day, I think they've got some future first round picks as well from it, and it's not the end of the world for them. Is their team better? Probably slightly better. Daniel Rioli, John Noble, they certainly have added some running and ball use out of their back line. I think that's obviously beneficial. It'll be interesting to see what Lukosius does at Port Adelaide, but overall, a decent off-season so far for Gold Coast. We'll see how they go with their academy players. GWS, interesting off-season they've had. We're not going to go into the off-field stuff because obviously there's a bit of news in that. It's released the official stuff from AFL recently, but overall, we'll have a look at the playing side of things. In comes Jake Stringer, which I cannot believe they've done. With off-field issues at the club arising this week, it's very strange that they would bring in Jake Stringer, in my opinion, but that's what they've done. They've identified him as someone that was gettable, that can change the fates of this club that the last couple of years has just missed out. Obviously, just losing in a prelim in 2023 and then in 2024 being 7 goals up in a semi-final before losing to the eventual premiers. So, they just want to take that next step. Out goes, this is where it's interesting, Isaac Cumming, Nick Haynes, James Peatling, and Harry Perryman. All players that probably play most, if not every week for GWS. I know Nick Haynes only played 8 matches this year, but he's someone that has played a lot of games. He's getting towards the end of his career, 211 games now. 20 of them in 2023, only 8 this year. So was a drop-off. Still someone that they probably, in an ideal world, wouldn't have lost. James Peatling's huge loss. Harry Perryman, in my opinion, is a really bad loss as well, as is Isaac Cumming. So not ideal in that way. Draft picks-wise, they have got a pretty good hand. Picks 15, 16, 21 are all really solid picks, as well as 37, 56, and 74. So for the future of their club, pretty good. They've got some good draft picks. They have a potential to really do well on draft night. I don't see this being a better team in 2025, than it was in 2024. Stringer in, but 4 outs. In my eyes, it doesn't make their team better. But that's only my opinion. It's not everyone's opinion. So that's half the clubs done. We'll jump into the back half of the AFL now. We've got Hawthorn Hawks, who had a really good off-season so far. Josh Battle, Tom Barras coming in. Nobody leaving the club, which is huge. And 3 draft picks, 33, 71, 77. So nothing huge in the draft pick stocks, but they were a team that made it all the way to a semi-final. Just lost in a close one in a semi-final. And they add Josh Battle and Tom Barras to their back line. So a bit more experience down back. I mean, their back line's pretty good already. It's going to be interesting to see how all of them fit into the one lineup. But, really beneficial backman coming in to a team that was very good this year. So they've improved, no doubt about it. They're likely to have a much tougher draw this year in 2025 than they did last year. They no longer will be the hunters. They'll probably be a little bit more hunted than they were last year. It's not going to be easier, but their team has certainly got better. So, positive sign there for Hawthorn. Melbourne Demons, 2 players come in. Harry Sharp, Tom Campbell join the club. Now goes Alex Neil-Bullen, and only 2 draft picks, but picks 5 and 9 is a really, really solid opportunity for the Demons to make a move and make a really big draft year that sets them up for the future. Because I mean, they're not necessarily done. They still have some very good players, but their best players, pretty much all their good players, are getting on in age. Oliver's still got a lot of years on his contract. Will he play them all at Melbourne? I guess we'll find out. Petrarca probably still has a few years left in him. Max Gawn's getting certainly very close to the end. I mean, he's not there yet. He's still All-Australian ruckman this year. But he won't have more than maybe 3 or 4 years in him at most. So this gives them a chance to start building that team up. They have not a team that has had a huge amount of draft picks in the last 5-6 years because they've been up the top. They've obviously won the premiership in 2021. They then made top 4 the next 2 years, and then obviously this year they then dropped off a bit. So this is their opportunity to build a bit of young talent in their list for the future, I guess. While still, I don't think their team's got worse. It probably hasn't really got better though. They're going to have to perform. But having said that, with 6-7 weeks to go this season in 2024, they were still well and truly in the final hunt. They were in the top 8, and they looked like they were going to do it. They beat the Bombers in the rain one day, and it looked like maybe they will get top 8 spot, but from that point on, they really struggled. So they weren't far off. Obviously, Petrarca coming back from injury is going to be huge for them. So if they can get a couple good young players, Melbourne will be really happy with their off-season. Next up, North Melbourne. Interesting one, this one. Bring in 3 senior players, and lost nobody. They've still got pick 2 in the draft, as well as pick 62, but we'll just forget about that. So they're going to get a good draft pick, use that wisely, chuck in the fact that, they've got 3 senior players coming in Jack Darling, Caleb Daniel and Luke Parker. None of them will probably be playing more than 2, maximum 3 more seasons, you wouldn't think. But maybe bringing in this experience will give the younger players a little bit of development and a little bit of experience around them that will really benefit them in the long run. I don't think Kangaroos are ready yet to push for top 8, but they're a team that needs to start pushing towards 10th. They can't just keep finishing bottom 3 and losing a lot more games than they win. Their finish to 2024 was disastrous. Their last game was an absolute schmozzle. You have to think bringing in 3 senior players here, in Jack Darling, Caleb Daniel and Luke Parker, that they won't allow that to happen again, but they just can't afford those sort of games going forward, in my opinion. Next up, Port Adelaide. Port Adelaide fans are not happy. It's safe to say they are not happy. Dan Houston leaves the club. In comes Lukosius, Richards, Atkins. They still have picks 13, 29, 36, 50. So, overall, losing 2-time All-Australian is not ideal. There's no doubt about it. They get in Lukosius and Joe Richards. Joe Richards will probably come into a forward role, pretty consistent small forward role for them. Lukosius, hopefully, in my eyes, he's a very good player. He's played some really good games. Go watch his game up north against Geelong this year. It was around about round 9 or 10, somewhere around there. His game that day was outstanding and showed the ability that he has. He just hasn't been able to consistently do that. Maybe moving to a club like Port Adelaide might be what unlocks his full potential. So if that's the case, this will be a good trade period for them. Obviously, Houston going out is not ideal. There's no doubt about it. But Lukosius could be good. Joe Richards will get plenty of games for them. I don't know about the Rory Atkins bit. That was just chucked in, but whatever. Picks 13, that's a great pick. You can get a good play with that this year. 29, 36, and 50. So it's not all doom and gloom for Port Adelaide. I don't know if they've got better, but I don't think they've got worse. They did win that semi-final against Hawthorn without Dan Houston. So it's not the end of the world them losing him. Lukosius and Richards, I think, are good inclusions. I don't think it's doom and gloom. I actually think it's an okay off-season. I know they wouldn't have wanted to lose Dan Houston, but once he wants out, this is a decent result, I think, in my opinion. Maybe they wanted more back for Dan. Maybe they should have tried to get more back for Dan. But at the end of the day, it's not that bad of a position. Richmond Tigers, nobody coming in, which isn't a surprise. 4 players leaving, 4 senior players, 4 premiership players, and all players that have played a lot of games. Liam Baker, Shea Bolton, Jack Graham, and Daniel Rioli all leaving the club. Chuck in the fact that there's multiple retirees between Dustin Martin and Pickett, and I don't know if there was any more. It's changing of the times for Richmond. You can completely understand it. They won 3 out of 4 premierships. You're going to have a lull after that, in all honesty. Hawthorn, it happened to Hawthorn. They bounced back pretty quickly. It's now happening to Richmond. It's just the way the footy should work. The league should work. It doesn't always happen. Teams like Geelong continually just keep bouncing back quicker than anyone else. But Richmond have set themselves up here. This draft is going to be insane for them. They've got pretty much outside of Ashcroft, they're going to get their pick of whatever they want. They've got picks 1, 6, 10, 11, 18, 20, 23, and 24. So by pick 1 of round 2, they've already going to have 8 picks. They don't have any picks after that, but by the first pick of round 2, they've had 8 picks. That's huge amount of picks, huge amount of young talent that can come into this club. You wonder where the leadership will be around to develop these players. Losing a lot of their experience is not great. I mean, obviously Nankervis is still there as their captain. Taranto's there, so they've still got some senior players, but it'll be interesting to see what this club is like over the next couple of years. I wouldn't imagine they'll be getting too many wins, but it's all about trying to develop that culture and these young players to be the best that they can be in the future. So we'll see how that plays out for them. But draft night will be very busy for the Richmond Tigers, and they will be hoping that they make full use of that. Next up, we have the St Kilda Saints. In comes McRae, out goes Josh Battle. They've got picks 7, 8, 32, 47. So McRae for Battle, I think it's not a bad change. Different rolled players. McRae coming in, I think, is a benefit for them. Battle leaving is obviously not a benefit for them, no doubt about it, but it's not the end of the world. They've still got picks 7 and 8, which is huge in this draft. In a draft where Richmond have, as we said, 8 picks out of 24, to have 2 in the top 10 as another club is really good. It's a team that didn't miss finals by that much in the end. It was all based on the start of their season. So they don't really need that much to take the next step. I think a better start to the season, slight change in philosophy in game plan, whether Ross Lyon can do that or not, I don't know. But when they were attacking, they looked a lot better than when they just sit back and defend. So if they can do that more consistently, pick 7, 8 coming in, it could be huge for them going forward. They should be a team that improves. They should be a team that really should be pushing for top 8 next year. Whether they are or not is a different story. Next up, we have Sydney. Nobody coming into the team, which is... There's 2 ways to look at it. I think a negative. Luke Parker going out as well as Jacob Constanti. Luke Parker, obviously a bad out for them after... he couldn't get a game at one point last year. Or this season, sorry. But he ended up with 10 games. He kicked a lot of goals, or 14 goals. So it's not a lot of goals, but it's 1.4 goals a game. I think he had a good season. He was certainly not their worst while he was playing. So I think that's a net loss overall, certainly to their depth. Yeah, to their depth, I think it's a definite loss. I don't think he's... it's not the end of the world. They've still got picks 19, 22, so those two solid picks, 44 and 59. Their team hasn't got better. There's no doubt about it. But they played good enough football this year to be a team that wins a premiership up until the last day. They just, for the second time in 3 years, failed on grand final day. Just didn't show up. And that's their issue. They're not a team that needs to get better. They're a team that needs to just show up on the last day. So they still have a team that's good enough, provided not too many teams overtake them this year, which there's a few potential teams that will. Next up, West Coast. They've had a busy off-season, haven't they? Incoming Liam Baker, Matthew Uys, Jack Graham. So 3 ins. I don't know if they're the biggest ins of all time, but certainly 3 ins. Going out Tom Barras and Jack Darling. They have picks 12, 26, 73. West Coast fans are livid about giving up pick 3 to Carlton. I understand it. I get it. But at the same time, they're a team that has been down for so long. Maybe they're just trying to bounce. They've had 21, 22, 23, now 24. I think 4 seasons really low on this ladder without that many wins. They're a team that last year went heavy on the draft, got Harley Reid. I think they need to show Harley Reid this year. They've got this year to prove to him that they are doing the right things, that they are ready to go. Because if they don't this year, there's a chance that Harley Reid will be gone before long from the West Coast Eagles, which is definitely not what they want. So maybe that's why they've gone pretty hard this year in bringing Baker, Graham, and even Uys in, who adds that small forward goal-kicking pressure for oppositions to deal with, which they kind of do lack, in all honesty. They have Luke Ryan, who's kind of that role at times. Different player, Uys, though. He's the one that gets under your skin. He's the one that is a pest. He's like Tom Papley. All the good teams tend to have them. He's their one now. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I mean, Baker's a solid player. Graham's a really good player. Losing Barras is not great. Darling isn't as bad of a loss. They'd lose some goal kicking from that, but hopefully Uys, for their sake, replaces some of that. Chuck in the fact that Oscar Allen will have another year of development. I think it's make or break time for the Eagles. I don't think they need to make finals this year. I think they need to show that they've improved. They need to get at least 8 wins in 2025. Probably closer to 10 plus wins in 2025. Otherwise, they are risking losing someone like Harley Reid and having to restart, which would not be what they need. Draft picks, 12 is pretty good still. Should be able to get a good player with that. 26 is pretty solid as well. Should get a player that has potential. And 73, we'll forget about that one. Onto the Western Bulldogs. In comes Matt Kennedy from Carlton. Bit of a surprise, that one, a little bit. All of this, or most of this, all happened towards the end of trade week. So Matt Kennedy coming in, outgoing Bailey Smith, Caleb Daniel, Jack McRae. They've got picks 17, 25, 35 and 48. Interesting off-season for them for sure. Overall, you look at that and you say that's a net loss. Bailey Smith, Caleb Daniel, Jack McRae out, only Matt Kennedy coming in. You'd see Matt Kennedy basically replacing the Jack McRae role. Bailey Smith, Caleb Daniel going out, though, with nothing coming in, is not great. 17, 25 are okay picks without being great. It's hard to see the Bulldogs improving. They're a team that could slide next year. They've still got Bont, who, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinions, is the best player in the AFL. they've still got a really, really good midfield. Treloar, Bontempelli, Liberatore, Ed Richards. So they've got a really good midfield. Their forward line is a bit hit and miss. They've got some good players that can show some really good signs, but they lack a little bit of consistency. And their backline in the second half of the season was really good up until the finals, where they got smacked by Hawthorn. So last year's team was pretty good. They didn't need to really improve much. It was basically just execution, in my opinion. Losing these players, Bailey Smith wasn't playing, so we'll ignore that a little bit. He wasn't playing and he was pretty much always leaving. We all knew it. Caleb Daniel, Jack McRae, they weren't getting consistent game time anyway, so it's not the end of the world. I just don't see how they've improved at the moment. But we'll see how that plays out, I guess, over the rest of the off-season and into 2025. So that's pretty much the 18 teams wrapped up. That's how we see it. We've still got plenty more content coming out over the future weeks. A little bit on what the podcast is doing over the coming month or so. Obviously, AFLW is ramping up. There's not many weeks left before finals, so every Monday we'll be diving into the AFLW. A few weeks left. We'll be looking at every match, previewing every match, reviewing every match, as we always do. I'm really, really getting invested in the AFLW this season, and certainly of the last few weeks. It's something that I think everyone should give a go, because it's a lot different than the men's game. There's no doubt about it. It's a different style of game. It's a completely different game of football, but that doesn't mean it's worse. Just give it a go. It certainly can be entertaining. But on the men's side of the podcast, there's plenty of content coming. We're going to be doing next week is probably going to be our top 50 players of 2024. So we'll be doing that in next week's pod. Following week, we'll probably be doing report cards for season 2024. And then after that, we'll be getting towards draft time. So we'll start looking towards the draft, what each team needs, potentially what each team is looking at, who should be getting picked up early. We'll be looking at all of that. So plenty of content to come on the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Slightly shorter than normal episodes. A lot of content still splurted out. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of your team's trade week. Did you do much? Did you do enough? Did you do too much? Let me know below. I'll be back on Monday for episode 69, which will be AFLW Week 9. Thanks for tuning in. Catch us then.